The Lake County Sheriff adding a new tool that can save lives thanks to a donation.
Montana's top climate scientists in northwest Montana to talk about Montana's climate assessment.
And nearly 60 pets are now in Montana with hopes for a new life.
Powered by the Montana Television Network. This is the 10 o'clock news on KPAX, Montana's news leader.
Good evening, I'm Jill Valley.
And I'm Dennis Bragg. Glacier Park Superintendent says he's seen firsthand how climate change is going to change and is changing our national parks.
Jeff Mao spoke at the first ever Montana Climate Assessment in Kalispell tonight. He talked about the summer fires that burned tens of thousands of acres, while at the same time the park was seeing snowfall. He also says he's seen firsthand the effects of climate change while working in national parks in Alaska and believes adapting to the changing weather is how our parks will survive.
Thinking about the changes that were talked about in the climate assessment are some of those things we have to be thinking about in terms of vulnerabilities of our structures, vulnerabilities of our trails and our roads, all our built infrastructure. We really need to be thinking as we go into the future of what's going to work for the next 100 years.
The link to the entire Montana Climate Assessment report is available on our website, KPAX.com. Turning now to our weather, the winds are going to pick up across western Montana and beyond. Russ Thomas now has more on what we can expect and when. Russ.
Yeah, that's right. And we're going to talk about those winds in just one second. I do want to show you what we had outside today. Of course, many of you were outside at some point or another, but it was beautiful all the way around in all parts of western Montana. We've got our First Security Bank iCam showing you that sunshine we had in Hamilton this afternoon. Good looking day. Here is that wind advisory. It is from noon tomorrow through 9 p.m. Now, the area that will see the winds the first and the strongest are going to be northwest Montana. Then those winds will move south and east throughout the day. We'll have more on this advisory plus chances of rain coming up in just a few minutes.
Thanks, Russ. The numbers are very preliminary, but they reinforce what we suspected all along. This summer's fire season smoke was bad enough to send more people to the hospital than in most fire years. We're all in agreement this summer's fire smoke was among the worst in decades, with Missoula County surrounded by fires burning hundreds of thousands of acres. And now the first results of a report by the Montana Department of Health and Human Services is confirming the smoke was making a lot of people sick enough to send them to the hospital.
Looking specifically at people who had complaints of cough and asthma, shortness of breath, wheezing, and other symptoms of smoke-related issues, they found that compared to the same time period in 2016, which if we recall was kind of a quiet smoke year, we don't have much smoke, there's a 2.3 times increase in the number of people going to emergency departments for those respiratory-related issues.
This state report is separate from a specific study by the University of Montana analyzing the fire impacts in Seeley Lake. And Cofield says the number really doesn't come as a surprise because health officials have been hearing reports all summer of people being sickened by the choking, never-ending smoke day after day. But it's useful because of confirmation of what they're hearing with hard numbers based on zip codes for Missoula and Powell counties.
There's a lot of ways you can take this and look at it more closely and parse some different things out. But from just a very first broad look at it, there was a definite increase in the number of people going to emergency departments with respiratory concerns.
This report, along with the UM study and other research, is going to help the health department and other agencies as they consider ways to modify the warning system so advisories can be more useful in years when there's extreme fire smoke.
It's sad that we can see such a clear uptick, just because it means that many more people were suffering compared to when there isn't smoke. But it is also nice to have science and understand what was going on, and hopefully that will give us some good information for going into future smoke years on what we can expect.
More detailed reports on this summer's fire smoke impacts aren't expected to be finished until next year.
Crews have been hard at work bracing up the remains of the burned Sperry Chalet in Glacier Park. That historic landmark burned in the Sprague fire back in late August. A 10-member crew flew to Sperry last week to stabilize the wall of the dormitory building before winter sets in. The workers are bracing the walls and gables and putting collars around the chimneys. Park officials say the crew is trying to protect the stone masonry structure from the snow that will push in on the sides of the wall and, of course, the winds that hit Glacier in the winter. The work is expected to wrap up this week. week, and then the park will assess how the structure fared through the winter and develop additional next steps in the spring. The Glacier National Park Conservancy launched the Sperry Action Fund campaign that has supported nearly all of the stabilization effort.
In Lake County, first responders may need to travel quite a ways to respond to an emergency.
MTN's Augusta McDonald has more on how Lake County staff are taking on the challenge with new life-saving equipment and training.
When someone's heart stops beating in Lake County, sheriff's deputies might actually be the first people on scene who could save their life. Now they'll be carrying new equipment that could help them do that. 23 AEDs, that is, automatic external defibrillators, have been installed in every officer's cruiser, plus there's one in the courthouse. A local family foundation granted $25,000 to provide these devices.
I was actually in the community one day, and a gentleman and him and his wife walked up and says, "This is something we do in the communities. We did it in other communities. We would like to see whether Lake County Sheriff's Office would like to be part of this." And I said, yes, we would.
Sheriff Bell says all deputies and many of the courthouse staff are trained and are ready to use the new AEDs.
You pull this down, it's pretty simple. The green, this tab here, we pull this tab, out comes the trays you can see with the pads in it. We will open the pads up, one to go on the chest here, one to go on the side of the chest here. You push the heart button. It checks the patient, what rhythm or what it needs, or whether it needs a shock. If it needs a shock, it'll tell us. It tells you it's charging. It tells everybody to stand clear. And then you push the shock button, it will shock the person, and then it'll tell you to start doing CPR again, doing chest compressions and breathing.
I know in my career, I've did CPR on five individuals, 3 adults and 2 infants, and I would love to have had one of these to increase the odds on those people.
He says the devices will increase the patient's chances of surviving. Reporting in Polson, I'm Augusta McDonald for MTN News.
Times are changing, and the long debate over grizzly bear management in Montana as the growing population of bears pushes the species closer to not having special treatment and protection. But the question of whether that puts the big bears in the crossroads or crosshairs remains unresolved. While much of the current focus is on the delisting of bears in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, the growing population of bears in the northern Continental Divide ecosystem also has biologists discussing whether those grizzlies should be taken off the list of threatened species. However, conservation groups worry that could jeopardize the bears' recovery, even as the state prepares plans to use hunting to manage populations. Tuesday, a panel of scientists and researchers will join Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks to discuss future grizzly management. The event is sponsored by the local Citizen Task Force, Wilderness Watch, Environmental Studies, and the Montana chapter of the Sierra Club, among others. Panel discussions are scheduled for 1 to 4:30 at the 3rd floor of the University Center, followed by an evening presentation by respected bear specialist James Jonkel at the Public House at 130 East Broadway. That'll start at 7 p.m.
Nearly 60 pets were rescued and escaped euthanasia after they were loaded onto a plane in New Mexico this morning. 20 of them were dropped off in Boise, Idaho, another 20 in Sun Valley, but the final 18 landed right here in Missoula.
It was quite the fuzzy cargo. MTN's Kent Lutzen brings us the story of a company, Dog is My Co-Pilot, who are transporting thousands of pets to places with higher adoption rates.
Animal advocacy groups say nearly 6.5 million pets are put in shelters throughout the year, and 4 million are euthanized due to the lack of resources. Oreo here is one that was put on a plane in New Mexico this morning and is on a life-changing journey.
States like Texas, Arizona, California, and New Mexico are struggling to keep up with the amount of stray pets showing up at adoption centers, some receiving nearly 100 a day. Because of this overcrowding problem, the animal shelters are left with a few options.
They have 3 options. They can adopt them out, they can transport them, or they can euthanize them. And they can't transport them very far in a van, and all these surrounding facilities are in the same situation. So organizations like Dog is My Co-Pilot, it works out really well for them.
According to Rourke, until recently, these states in the South had an 80% euthanization rate. But that's where Dog is My Co-Pilot comes into play. They transport as many pets out of these states and into facilities like the Humane Society of Western Montana, which has a high adoption rate.
Our adoption program is pretty popular, so we average about 5 adoptions a day. And when we have good years like this one where we're able to help with lots of transfers and work with our regional and national partners, we can get 1,400 adoptions a year. So that's kind of our goal for this year, and we're pretty close.
After Oreo, Buddy, and Bernie, along with 12 other dogs and 3 cats, landed in Missoula, their future is looking a lot brighter and are now looking for their Montana home. But Rourke said this is not a pet problem, rather a people problem.
People are not spaying and neutering in the South, and that really is the key. The key is to adopt, don't shop, and spay and neuter. And if I haven't mentioned it, spay and neuter.
Reporting in Missoula, Kent Lutzen, MTN News.
So do you need a dog?
Maybe. I'd like one that could fly.
Well, there you
Since
go.
I can't fly a plane, well, no, I guess they're trained that way, but that would be
I would
cool.
get video of that
Yeah,
if you
that would
did
be
get
cool,
a dog.
yeah.
All right, still up after the break, Russ will talk about the wet and windy work week forecast.
And later, a Montana wind power developer is suing the state and the state's largest electric utility. We'll explain coming up on KPAX.